bill that has been rejected twice by the Regional Legislative Assembly since it was tabled way back in 2017.
There was even an attempt to walk out on this bill.
The East African Community Section Reproductive Health Bill 2021 has been at the center of recent discourse in the media, political spaces and spheres on human rights, law and health, and generally across the public within the East African community. Among others, the bill requires member states to provide at least adequate, accessible, and where they're not free, affordable sexual and reproductive health services to facilitate the realization of the highest attainable standard of health by every person within the East African community. And that there has been the center of contention, bringing back the debate of morality versus reality. So, I'm Solomon Serwanja. Welcome to the Deep Dive. And in this explainer, we walk back in time to follow the bill since it was tabled and explain what the bill is about, why it has sharply divided the East African community, and what are the implications if the bill does not pass into law. All right, let's get started. Now, during the third East African Legislative Assembly session back in 2017, Honorable Dr. Odette Nyamiramo from Rwanda tabled the bill for the first reading. Dr. Nyamiramo informed the August Assembly that the spirit behind this bill was to prevent unwanted pregnancy, risk abortions, and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV and AIDS, and also to ensure sexual reproductive health care for everyone, and indeed education and all services for all the people within the region. All right, let's get into the bill. Now, Section 17.2 provided that the partner states shall ensure that adolescents and young people get access to relevant quality and youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health services, including contraceptives and condoms, and that was very controversial. The bill also described the adolescents as any person aged between 10 and 19 years. That left many legislators debating. Section 15.1 of the bill also sought to legalize abortion, provided that a pregnancy endangers the woman's health and life. Now it reads in part, the partner state shall safeguard and give effect to reproductive rights of a woman by permitting the termination of pregnancy when, in the opinion of a trained health worker, endangers the health of the woman. These two issues, among others, were the center of attention and contradiction. The Speaker then referred the bill to the Committee on General Purpose to conduct public hearings and consultations about the bill and report back to the House within 90 days for the second reading. Now, whilst the Committee on General Purpose carried out public hearings and consultations on the bill on February 22nd all through to the 28th in 2017, the tenure of the Third Assembly came to an end before the process of the second and third reading of the bill was completed. Now, upon its inauguration, the Fourth Assembly passed a resolution to, among others, save and retain and continue with the same bill into the session. Now, the Committee on General Purpose then took it up as a committee bill. The Committee on General Purpose held a stakeholders workshop in Burundi's capital, Bujumbura, on the 23rd of January all through to the 28th of January 2020 to review the bill. Now, I spoke to some of the people who participated in the stakeholders workshop, and this is what they had to say.
Someone from Burundi, he was almost completely against the law. They say if we talk about the reproductive health, okay, about education, but don't go beyond. And when you talk as medical people, when we talk sexual and reproductive health, it is a big component. We talk about safe abortion, we talk about STI, we talk about maternal mother life, we talk about newborn, we talk about all those diseases. Those are the component of sexual and reproductive health.
Took a lot of time to say, if we call it East Africa Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Bill, the rights would mean that we're talking about homosexuality and everything. So that's one condition. I have read the bill many times. There are no provisions on LGBTI rights, though I would have loved actually to have them there.
While reporting back to the House after the stakeholders' engagement, the chairperson of the committee, Dennis Damara from Uganda, said that the language contained in the bill did not align with the domestic laws of the partner states. He also informed the August Assembly that the bill's content included what was and indeed is deemed to be varying understanding of the term abortion services. In the East African Community region, this differs a lot. Consequently, on February 12, 2021, the August Assembly, following numerous concerns raised by various stakeholders, the Assembly withdrew the East African Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Bill 2017, paving way for the Committee on General Purpose to redraft and, of course, come up with the said bill. So the bill was redrafted and presented once again for the first reading as the East African Sexual Reproductive Health 2017. Please note that the word rights was removed from the name of the bill. The bill was once again referred to the Committee on General Purpose and consultations in the different member states, and it has been going on and on and on. The committee has now heard from several stakeholders, including civil society, religious leaders, government agencies, the media, to mention but a few. Now, the most recent hearing was a public hearing that convened in Uganda, the Commonwealth Resort in Munyonyo in Kampala, on the 29th of June 2022.
But he's saying that the bill does not pass the test, viewed from their religious lenses, whether it is Catholic, whether it is Pentecostal, whether it is Muslim. They think that the bill does not pass their test, and therefore it should just be abandoned. There are also those groups that we have received petitions from that are saying the bill is progressive because it looks at their rights and it addresses the emerging issues with adolescents. There are increasing cases of child marriages, and they think that the bill speaks to that. So, there are really quite a number of views that are emerging, and we would wish that in the end we can then be able to aggregate these views and inform the debate that will accrue in the House.
What really is the bill about, and why has it sharply divided the community? I speak to different stakeholders from across the region, and this is what they had to say.
First, I think the East African Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Bill gives us a huge opportunity to tap into regionalism and move away from our national fears and areas where we have failed to advance sexual reproductive health and rights. I know that for a very long time, many of us have looked at the East African region from just a political point of view and a trade point of view. But some of us who do work on health and social services, we've not been able to tap into that regional space. And I think the laws that are being passed at a regional space are very, very useful.
For the bill to have access to contraceptives and even talking about availability and affordability, I think this is going to be a good milestone for us practitioners in Rwanda to not only, we are going to be having various tools now to use while seeking for contraceptives for minors.
Age-appropriate information. And it was, the drafters did it deliberately because we had to interact with the drafters. And they said, not all information is appropriate for every age group. So they used the word age appropriate, and therefore it's a subject of definition. So if you go into the definition clause, it is very specific on what age appropriateness means. But I think there is still been contention on even that very definition.
The bill is not only about access to safe and legal abortion. The bill is not only about access to age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education. The bill talks about non-discrimination. The bill talks about reproductive health care for the elderly. The bill talks about menstrual hygiene care. The bill talks about holistic quality reproductive health care. Objectivity. We have our moral compasses. We have our religious and social compasses. But again, objectivity when it comes to engaging with this document. What is the good of the people you're representing in the assembly?
One of the contentious issues in the bill is the issue of access to safe abortion. The other issue to speak about is access to age-appropriate information. And another one, access to contraceptives for young people. The difference in the legislative framework of the different partner states on these controversial issues has largely delayed the progression of the bill. Let us sample 3 of the countries in the region, including Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, on these issues. Let's start off with Rwanda, that made progressive laws regarding access to abortion. In fact, it is legal for women and girls to procure an abortion, safe and clinical, if it falls under certain categories.
And the first condition, which wasn't in the Penal Code in 2012, was the fact that the pregnant person is a child below the age of 18 by standard. If she's pregnant, she has the right to go request for safe abortion. Just being a child, rape, incest, forced marriage, and then for medical conditions. So the ministerial order is very elaborative. It talks about who should do it, where should be done, at what gestation age, 22 weeks, by who. So everything is at least termed within the ministerial order, which we believed that at least it would somehow bring some hope to these vulnerable women and girls.
On the other issue, which is the issue of access to contraceptives for young people, the law only allows access of contraceptives to children below 18 years in the presence of a parent or guardian. Let us now focus on Kenya, because Kenya has one of the highest teenage pregnancies in the world.
You're seated in the lands of a country where it's ranked 3rd globally when it comes to the issues of teenage pregnancies. And just to have that picture, early this year, over 45,000 incidences of teenage pregnancies were reported. You're also sitting in a space where weekly 98 adolescents have new HIV infections, with roughly over 4,000 HIV-related deaths amongst the adolescents. Again, in a country where 7 women and girls lose their lives daily from unsafe abortion and unsafe abortion-related complications, with a maternal mortality rate of roughly around 340.
So what we have been seeing, particularly over the past few years, within the mid-2010s, around 2014, 2015, there definitely was a push towards much more progressive laws, policies, and programming towards adolescents. So we had things like the adolescent package of care that expanded on, sexual and reproductive health services that adolescents could access, including contraceptives. We also had policies around adolescent and youth-friendly services that, sort of protect the dignity, particularly like the dignity of adolescents when they're receiving services, because a very common experience among young people and adolescents when they're going to receive sexual and reproductive health services is stigma and discrimination.
On the issue of access to clinical safe abortion, the law is restrictive in Uganda. Rose Wachikona is a lawyer and sexual reproductive health and rights activist.
What our law says about abortion is, number 1, in our constitution, where under Article 22(2), the constitution says that no one is authorized to terminate the life of an unborn child except as may be authorized by law. The challenge is that no law has been made since 1995 when our constitution was made. So we are operating in a lacuna. What exists is the Penal Code Act, which was passed in 1954 and is actually a preserve of the British colonialists who left it with us. And what it does is to provide criminal provisions that criminalize abortion and make it illegal within the country. They criminalize a woman who seeks an abortion, they criminalize a person who supports them to seek this abortion, and they also criminalize the supply of medicines that are needed to have an abortion, and also for post-abortion care. They impose a maximum of 7 years imprisonment if you're convicted of any of these offenses.
Moses Mulumba is a human rights lawyer and the Director General of Afya na Haki. He argues that the laws are colonial and draconian.
Many laws that are impacting on sexual reproductive health and rights continue to be colonial. These are laws we have failed to amend at the national level. These are laws we have failed to address and update at a national level. But the East African community gives us a huge opportunity to decolonize the laws, move the laws from the colonial frameworks in which they were built, and actually make them those that are relevant to the East African community.
Mulumba says that the country needs to wake up to these consequences and take advantage of the regional bill.
But what we are saying is that let's look at what evidence is telling us, what is happening with young people and access to safe and legal abortions. And let's regulate that evidence. If it means going back and having some national processes at a national level, or if it means meaning that we have some consensus at the regional level on how we should be dealing with access to safe and legal abortions, let us deal with it, because
access to sexual reproductive health and rights commodities and information to young people has also been controversial. Mulumba says that there is need to look at the numbers.
We need to look at issues of, for instance, access, universal access to health care that is related to sexual reproductive health and rights within the context of the universal health insurance that is being talked about. I think these are things that we have failed to win at the national level, that we can win at the regional level. How do we ensure that access to sexual reproductive health and rights commodities as part of a health setting is actually achieved? And if we can push through that at a regional level, that will be a milestone.
It is the diversity in both the legal and policy frameworks of the member states that has left the region divided on the bill. The issue of the bill has also turned political.
I represent Ugandans, and that's the reason why I would wish that Ugandans, a full spectrum of all these stakeholders, are given the opportunity to express themselves, and then eventually we have a country position. We do not yet have a country position on this matter until we finish the full stretch of consultations. And being the person who is supposed to speak for them, it would not be appropriate for me to express my personal views, because then I would have shown biases, and I would then influence the process of consultations. But I feel that an opportunity will come when I will also subject my personal views to the aggregate position that is there, and then we can come up with something.
The tenure of the assembly is almost coming to an end. The people opposing the bill say that they will use it as an opportunity to vote out any of the members who has been supporting the bill. In fact, on the 4th of August 2022, the Parliamentary Forum on Ethics and Integrity in Uganda urged candidates aspiring to join the East African Legislative Assembly to uphold moral and cultural values while processing the Sexual and Reproductive Health Bill 2021. The forum chairperson, that is James Nsababuturo, said, and I quote, "After all the failed attempts, they decided to sugarcoat the bill with some popular provisions, but when you assess it, you will find abortion, homosexuality, and these are not our values. This is not what we stand for, and it is not our culture."
I know that there have been attempts to stampede us to pronounce ourselves on this bill. But we are restrained to pronounce ourselves because we are delegated by Ugandans. So as one section of the people cannot stampede us to pronounce ourselves on their views. We would rather that we have a majority position on this matter, and then we are able to represent the views. And there we have legitimate voices in the House.
This has brought back the argument of morality versus reality. Pressure from moralists has, according to those who are pushing for the bill, has clouded the thoughts of the legislators.
Can't overlook the fact that these legislators are from different cultural backgrounds, with different religious, different moral, different societal beliefs. And trust you me, that is what drives them. You can ask a member of parliament, why can't you push for this? They're like, it's a very good bill, but again, how do I push for the abortion agenda to my people in this election period? Now that Yala is going to be dissolved in the next few months, you know? And ask them, they'll be like, it's not culturally right. It's not morally right. It's not societally right. That is majorly the explanations that we get.
Amidst the pressures, some people are losing hope that the bill will ever make it to the second reading and therefore passed before the close of the fourth assembly.
I've lost hope that this bill is going to be passed by the current year. As you know, the current year, I think, will finish their term before the end of this year. And from what I'm seeing and the experience we had with public hearings, most likely this bill won't see the lights with this current year. We are actually starting to strategize on how do we engage the next members of parliament for it to be passed.
But what happens if the bill doesn't make it to the second reading? Those pushing for the bill have said that they will organize better ahead of the next EALA.
The same way we did in 2019, we still continue to champion then that bill is saved and becomes a committee bill, so that even as the next parliament comes in, they are picking the bill up as is. And we're in a much better position in terms of civil society coordination at the regional level.
I'm seeing as civil society organizations taking on a campaign of awareness of the bill, because people have to know the bill. There's having the bill, and people knowing the bill is another thing. So we're going to do the awareness of the bill once the bill is out, but then the positive side that I told you, the access to contraceptives, a dialogue we think we need to engage again with the Catholic Church in Rwanda, the access to contraceptives.
While others say it would be important to get the regional heads of states on board to fast-track the process.
If you want that the bill can quick pass, give it to the head of state. As long as the head of state, they are not again, make it the priority, we're still facing many challenges because it is not easy all members of parliament of EALA to have a common understanding and pass the bill.
Those who are against the bill say that they will do everything possible for the bill to be kicked out. Moses Mulumba, however, says that the region needs to take advantage of the regional efforts to pass the law that will save many lives.
Regionalism is not just about politics. It's not just about economics. Regionalism is also about social issues that are impacting on the things that we handle. If there is a huge opportunity for us to use the sub-regional level of the East African community to pass laws that will fail at the national level, to also deal with the decolonization element. You know, part of decolonizing is running away from colonial laws that we are introduced at the country level. Let us use the regional spaces to decolonize that. Let us use the regional spaces to begin climbing up as Africa and develop very strong messages that Africa is not tied back to the history of its own, but also the history of its colonialists. If we are able to handle that at the regional level, we'll have achieved it.
But while the debate of the bill continues, statistics in the region tell it all. Let's look at those figures. 2.2 million unplanned pregnancies happen within the East African community alone. 14% of all pregnancies within the East African community end up in crude abortions, while HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women continues to rise. Currently, about 29% of new HIV infections occur to adolescent girls, according to UNAIDS. Solomon Senwanja, AIJ unveils.